The scent of death clung to the morning air like a promise unfulfilled. Thorne stood at the window of his private chambers, watching dawn break over the mountains that ringed Silvercrest territory, and felt the weight of leadership settle heavier on his shoulders than it had in 20 years. Behind him, in the bed they had shared for 2 decades, his mate was dying. Sarah's breathing came shallow and ragged, each exhale a reminder that time was running out, not just for her, but for the entire pack. The Luna's curse had taken hold 6 months ago, triggered by an ancient magic that even their eldest healers could not reverse. It was a cruel thing, this curse. It demanded a true heir born after the Luna ceremony, a child conceived from fated mates bound by the moon's own choosing. Thorne and Sarah had 2 children, Owen at 12 and Bryn at 9, both strong and brave and everything parents could hope for. But they had been born before the Luna ceremony, before Sarah took her place as the pack's female alpha, and therein lay the curse's teeth. Sarah stirred, her voice a whisper that somehow carried across the room. "Come here, love. Stop brooding at the window like a gargoyle." Thorne turned, managing a smile despite the ache in his chest. At 42, he was in his prime as an alpha, his body still powerful, his mind still sharp. The gray at his temples only made him look more distinguished, more commanding. His shoulders were still broad enough to carry the weight of pack leadership. His hands were still strong enough to defend his territory against any challenger. But watching the woman he loved waste away stripped him of every advantage, left him feeling helpless as a pup. "I'm not brooding. I'm thinking." "Same thing with you." Sarah's laugh turned into a cough that rattled in her chest. 20 years and you still can't fool me. You're doing both, and neither will change what's coming." She pushed herself up against the pillows, wincing at the effort. Her dark hair, once thick and lustrous, had thinned to wisps. Her amber eyes, though, remained fierce. "We need to talk about succession. We've had this conversation." Thorne crossed the room, sat on the edge of the bed. "There is no succession. You are my mate. You are Luna. I am dying." Sarah reached for his hand, laced her fingers through his. "The pack bond is fracturing. You can feel it, can't you? The uncertainty, the fear. Without a strong Luna, Silvercrest will collapse from within before any enemy attacks from without." He wanted to deny it, but she would know the lie. Pack bonds were built on truth, on the connection between Alpha and Luna that anchored every member. He could feel the threads of those bonds straining, could sense the anxiety rippling through his wolves. "Then we'll find another way. There has to be another way." "There isn't." Sarah's grip tightened on his hand. "And you know it. The moon chooses fated mates for a reason, Thorne. We chose each other out of politics and duty, and we've built a good life together. I've never regretted that choice, but we were never fated, and that's why the curse has taken hold." She paused, gathering strength. "You need to find your true fated mate, the bond the moon intended for you." The words hit him like a physical blow. "You're asking me to replace you while you're still alive. I'm asking you to save our pack." Sarah's eyes glistened, but her voice remained steady. "I'm asking you to find the mate who will stand beside you when I'm gone, who will mother our children, who will give you the heir the curse demands. And I'm telling you that I've made peace with this. You should too." A knock at the door interrupted whatever response Thorne might have made. Magnus entered without waiting for permission, the old healer's face grave beneath his shock of white hair. At 65, Magnus had served 3 alphas before Thorne, had seen everything the world of wolves could throw at a pack. Very little shook him anymore. The fact that his hands trembled as he approached the bed told Thorne everything he needed to know. "How long?" Thorne asked. Magnus set his medical bag on the side table, began checking Sarah's pulse. 6 months was my most optimistic estimate. The curse is accelerating faster than I anticipated. Now? She has perhaps a month, maybe less. He met Thorne's eyes. "You need to make a decision, Alpha. Soon." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Sarah squeezed Thorne's hand. "There's a rogue at our borders. You've been watching her for 3 years. Go to her. Find out if she's the one." Thorne pulled his hand away, stood abruptly. "She's a rogue, an exile. Valdis of Blackthorn declared her a murderer." "Valdis declares many things," Sarah said quietly. "Most of them lies designed to consolidate his power. You've said yourself that something doesn't add up about that rogue. You've watched her, tracked her movements. She respects our boundaries, protects our scouts from feral attacks. That doesn't sound like a murderer to me. It sounds like someone with her own agenda." Thorne paced to the window again, looked out at the forest that marked the edge of his territory. Somewhere out there, in the gray space between packlands and true wilderness, lived the woman who had occupied far too many of his thoughts these past years. He told himself it was simple vigilance, keeping tabs on a potential threat, but Sarah knew him too well to accept that lie. "Then find out what that agenda is." Sarah's voice carried the command of a Luna, even weakened as she was. "I'm not asking you to betray me, Thorne. I'm ordering you as your Luna and your mate to seek out the woman who might save us all. If she's not your fated mate, we'll know. But if she is, you have my blessing, my command, and my love." The weight of her words settled over him like a mantle. As much as he wanted to refuse, to stay by her side until the end, he knew she was right. The pack came first. It always came first. That was the burden of leadership, the price of the power and privilege that came with being alpha. Your personal happiness, your personal grief, meant nothing next to the survival of those you led. Thorne turned from the window, met Sarah's gaze. "If I do this, if I go to her, it's only to investigate, nothing more." "Of course." Sarah smiled, and for a moment he saw the young woman he'd married, fierce and clever and utterly uncompromising in her dedication to their people. "Just promise me one thing. If you feel the bond, if the moon has truly chosen her for you, don't fight it. Don't let pride or guilt or misplaced loyalty keep you from what must be. And if I feel nothing, then we try something else. But Thorne, I know you. I've known you for 20 years, and I've seen the way you watch that rogue. There's something there, even if you won't admit it." She gestured weakly toward the door. "Now go, and take someone with you. Cole, perhaps. You shouldn't face a rogue alone." "I'm an alpha. I don't need backup to handle one exile." "Humor me then. Consider it my dying wish." The words were meant as a joke, a lightening of the mood, but they landed like stones. Thorne nodded once, unable to speak around the lump in his throat, and left before the tears he'd been holding back could fall. He found Cole in the training yard, drilling a group of young wolves in hand-to-hand combat. At 32, Cole was one of Silvercrest's finest warriors, a male who had seen human military service before his first shift activated and brought him into the world of wolves. He fought with a precision and tactical awareness that made him invaluable, and Thorne trusted him more than most of his inner circle. Cole dismissed the trainees when he saw Thorne approaching, grabbed a towel to wipe the sweat from his face. "Alpha, what can I do for you? Walk with me." Thorne waited until they were away from curious ears before continuing. "I need you to accompany me to the border. I'm going to make contact with the rogue." Cole's eyebrows rose. "About damn time. That woman has saved our scouts 3 times in the past year alone. We owe her a conversation at minimum." "You know about that?" "I'm captain of the guard. It's my job to know." Cole fell into step beside Thorne as they headed for the forest path that led toward the border. "The question is, what took you so long to acknowledge it?" "Politics, caution, stupidity. Take your pick." Thorne breathed deep, let the sense of pine and earth and growing things center him. "The truth is more complicated than I'd like." "It always is." Cole was quiet for a moment. "This is about Luna Sarah, isn't it? About finding your fated mate. Word travels fast. It's a pack. Everyone knows everything, usually before it happens." Cole's tone was gentle. "For what it's worth, sir, Sarah's right. The pack needs stability, and if that rogue is your fated mate, the moon knew what she was doing when she made the match." They walked in silence after that, following deer trails and ancient paths that wound through territory Thorne had known since childhood. The border lay 3 miles from the main den, marked not by fences or walls, but by scent markers that any wolf could read. Thorne had refreshed these markers himself countless times over the years, establishing and re-establishing his claim to this land. Now, as they approached the boundary, he felt something shift in the air, a presence, wild and wary, watching from the shadows. "She's here," Cole murmured. "Upwind, about 30 yards north. Been tracking us for the last half mile." "I know." Thorne had felt her the moment they entered this part of the forest, had been aware of her attention like pressure against his skin. He raised his voice, addressing the trees. "I'm not here to fight. I'm here to talk." For a long moment, nothing. then movement, fluid and careful, as a figure emerged from behind an ancient oak. She was smaller than Thorne had expected, maybe 5'6", lean and wiry with the kind of muscle that came from constant movement and irregular meals. Her hair was dark brown, pulled back in a braid that hung between her shoulder blades. She wore practical clothes, leather pants and a worn jacket, and she moved with the unconscious grace of someone who had spent years surviving on skill and instinct alone. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold, gray as storm clouds, wary as a cornered animal, and utterly, devastatingly familiar in a way he couldn't explain. The moment their gazes met, something in Thorne's chest twisted, then snapped into place with an almost audible click. Heat flooded through him, starting at his core and radiating outward until his fingertips tingled with it. His wolf surged to the surface with a roar of recognition that nearly drove him to his knees, every nerve ending suddenly alive with awareness of her. The scent of her hit him then, wild honeysuckle and rain-soaked earth, and something uniquely her that made his mouth water. Every instinct screamed at him to close the distance between them, to claim, to protect, to bind himself to this woman until not even death could separate them. His muscles locked with the effort of holding himself still, of not acting on the primal demand that thundered through his blood. Mine. The word echoed in his mind with absolute certainty, resonating in a place deeper than conscious thought. This was his mate. The moon had chosen well. She had given him a warrior, a survivor, someone whose strength matched his own, someone who would stand beside him, not behind him, someone worth fighting for, worth dying for, worth building a future around. The woman's expression didn't change. Her hand moved to the knife at her belt, a defensive gesture born of long habit. "Cross the border, Alpha, and you'll regret it." Her voice was rough, unused to speech, but it carried a strength that belied her size. Thorne forced himself to stillness, fought down the mating instinct that demanded he sweep her into his arms and never let go. "I have no intention of crossing. I came to talk. Alphas don't talk to rogues. They demand, they threaten, they exile." The bitterness in those words spoke of old wounds, deep betrayals. "Then I'll be the first to do it differently." Thorne spread his hands, showing empty palms. "I've watched you for 3 years. You respect my boundaries. You've saved my scouts. Why?" Suspicion flickered across her face. "Because I'm not a monster, despite what your council says. I never believed you were." Thorne took a careful step closer, still on his side of the border. "Tell me your name. Your real name, not the one whispered as a curse." She studied him for a long moment, weighing the risk. Finally, grudgingly, she spoke. "Ashlyn. My name was Ashlyn before I became the rogue. Ashlyn." Thorne let the name settle into his bones, let his wolf wrap around it like a treasure. "I'm Thorne. I know who you are, Alpha." Her tone softened fractionally. "What do you want from me?" Before Thorne could answer, the forest exploded with violence. 4 ferals burst from the underbrush, massive and twisted, their eyes glowing that sickly yellow that marked minds lost to madness. They moved with terrifying speed, targeting both Thorne and Ashlyn with coordinated precision that spoke of training, not wild instinct. Cole shifted instantly, his clothes tearing as gray fur rippled across his body. Thorne did the same, his shift smooth and practiced after decades of experience. His alpha wolf was larger than Cole's, black as midnight with eyes that glowed amber. But even as he moved to engage the ferals, part of his attention remained fixed on Ashlyn. She hadn't shifted. Instead, she moved like water, like smoke, her body twisting impossibly as she avoided snapping jaws by inches. Her knife flashed in the morning light, finding vulnerable spots with surgical precision. She targeted tendons and arteries, going for maximum damage with minimum effort. Every movement was economical, efficient, the product of years fighting alone where a single mistake meant death. She was fast, faster than any wolf he'd seen, and she fought with a cold efficiency that spoke of countless battles survived through skill alone. There was no wasted motion, no dramatic flourishes, just killing strokes delivered with the kind of focus that came from knowing that survival depended on ending threats quickly. One of the ferals lunged at her back while she was engaged with another. Thorne intercepted it mid-leap, his jaws closing on its throat with crushing force. He felt bones snap beneath the pressure, felt the hot gush of blood fill his mouth as the creature's windpipe collapsed. The taste was foul, wrong, tainted with whatever chemical had twisted this wolf into a monster. Hot blood filled his mouth as the creature went limp. He dropped it, spun to face the next threat, and found Ashlyn fighting two ferals at once. She'd opened the first one's throat with a slash across its jugular, was already spinning away from its falling body to engage the second. The feral's blood painted an arc through the air, spattering across leaves and bark. But she was tiring. He could see it in the slight slowness of her movements, the way her breathing came faster and harder. This was a woman who'd been living on the edge too long, who'd fought alone too often, who hadn't had a full meal or a safe night's sleep in who knew how long. Her ribs showed through her shirt when she moved. Her hands, despite their steadiness, bore scars that told stories of old battles barely won. The second feral saw the same weakness, pressed its advantage with the mindless persistence of the mad. It caught her across the ribs with one massive paw, claws tearing through leather and flesh like paper. Ashlyn went down with a gasp of pain, blood blooming across her side in an instant crimson stain. Thorne moved without thought. He crossed the distance between them in 3 massive bounds, hit the feral with his full weight and momentum. They rolled together in a tangle of fur and fury. The feral was strong, driven by the madness that had consumed its mind. But Thorne was stronger. He pinned it, ignored the claws raking across his shoulders, and crushed its skull between his jaws. When he looked up, Cole had finished the last feral. The forest fell silent except for harsh breathing and the drip of blood on leaves. Thorne shifted back to human form, his alpha power allowing him to manifest simple clothing from pack magic. He moved to where Ashlyn had propped herself against a tree, one hand pressed to her bleeding side. "Let me see." His voice came out rougher than he intended, thick with the need to tend his mate's wounds. "I'm fine." But she moved her hand anyway, revealing gashes that went deep. Not fatal, but serious. "You're not fine, and you fight like you've been doing it alone too long." Thorne crouched beside her, careful not to crowd her. "We need to talk about these ferals. They weren't natural." Ashlyn's eyes sharpened. "I know. I've been tracking them for weeks. Someone's creating them, sending them to hunt specific targets." "Who?" She met his gaze. "I think it's Valdis. I think he's hunting me." The name sent ice through Thorne's veins. Valdis of Blackthorn, the alpha who'd exiled Ashlyn, who'd branded her a murderer and sent warnings to every pack in the region. Why would he still be hunting you 3 years later? Ashlyn looked away, and for the first time since she'd appeared, Thorne saw something other than wariness in her expression. He saw pain, raw and fresh as the day it was dealt. "Because I know his secrets, because I'm proof of his crimes, and because I have information that could destroy him. Tell me." She shook her head. "Not here. Not like this." Her hand was still pressed to her side, blood seeping between her fingers. "I need to go." "Come to my territory." Thorne stood, offered his hand. "Let our healers treat your wounds. We can talk about Valdis, about the ferals, about why you've been protecting my scouts. You'll be safe there. You have my word." The laugh that escaped her was bitter. "The word of an alpha means nothing to me. I learned that lesson the hard way." "Then trust your instincts." Thorne kept his hand extended. "You've been watching my pack for 3 years. Have you ever seen me break my word? Have you ever seen me harm those under my protection?" Ashlyn stared at his hand for a long moment. Behind them, Cole stood watch, having shifted back to human form and pulled on spare clothes from the pack he always carried. Finally, slowly, Ashlyn reached out and placed her hand in Thorne's. The contact sent electricity racing up his arm, the mate bond flaring so bright it was a wonder she couldn't see it. Thorne helped her to her feet, steadied her when she swayed. "One night," she said, "I'll accept healing and answers about the ferals. Then I leave, one night to start." Thorne began walking, matching his pace to hers, Cole falling in behind them as guard. "But I hope I can convince you to stay longer." "Why?" Ashlyn's voice was sharp with suspicion. "What do you want from me, Alpha?" "Really?" Thorne considered the question as they walked, considered all the ways he could answer it. He could tell her about Sarah, about the dying Luna, and the desperate need for a fated mate. He could tell her about the pack bonds fraying, about the curse that demanded a true heir. He could tell her about the 3 years he'd spent watching her, drawn by something he couldn't name but couldn't deny. Instead, he told her the simplest truth. "I want to know why you saved my scouts when you owed my pack nothing. I want to know what Valdis did to make you an exile, and I want to know if you feel what I feel when we touch." Ashlyn pulled her hand from his. "I don't feel anything." It was a lie, and they both knew it. Thorne let it pass for now. Time would reveal the truth. Time and proximity, and the inexorable pull of a bond decreed by the moon herself. They reached the border, crossed into Silvercrest territory proper. Ashlyn tensed at first, old instincts screaming danger, but nothing attacked. No warriors emerged to threaten her. Instead, they walked paths lined with flowering trees, past streams that ran clear and cold from the mountains. It was beautiful land, well cared for, and Thorne felt a fierce pride in showing it to her. "Your territory is thriving." Ashlyn's tone held surprise. "We work hard to keep it that way." Thorne gestured to a section of forest where young trees had been planted in careful rows. Sustainable harvesting, crop rotation, controlled burns to prevent larger fires. If you're going to hold territory, you have to earn the privilege. Most alphas think the privilege is automatic, that the land owes them, not the other way around. "Most alphas are fools." The words came out harder than he intended. A true alpha serves his pack and his land. Anything else is just tyranny with a fancy title. Ashlyn gave him a look he couldn't quite read. "That's not a common opinion among your kind. It should be." Thorne held her gaze. "Power without responsibility is worthless. My father taught me that, and his father before him. Silvercrest endures because we understand that we're stewards, not owners." They emerged from this forest onto a ridge that overlooked the heart of Silvercrest territory. Below, the main dens sprawled across several acres, a combination of natural caves and constructed buildings that housed nearly 80 wolves. Smoke rose from cooking fires. Children played in a central courtyard. Gardens produced vegetables and herbs. It looked less like a military installation and more like a thriving village. "This is your home?" Ashlyn's voice was barely a whisper. "For 42 years. Thorne started down the trail that led to the den proper. "Come, I'll take you to the healers, then we'll talk somewhere private." As they descended, pack members stopped to stare. Not with hostility, Thorne was relieved to note, but with curiosity. Word of their approach had clearly preceded them, and by the time they reached the main courtyard, Magnus was waiting with a medical bag and a knowing look. "So this is our mysterious rogue." The old healer gestured toward a nearby building. "Bring her to the healing house. Let's see what damage those ferals did." Ashlyn balked at the entrance. "I can tend my own wounds." "I'm sure you can." Magnus's tone was gentle but firm. "But my alpha commanded me to heal you, and I don't disobey direct orders. Besides, from the way you're favoring that side, you've got at least 3 broken ribs along with the lacerations. You need proper treatment." She looked at Thorne, something like betrayal flashing in her eyes. "You said I'd be safe." "Safe doesn't mean untreated." Thorne kept his voice low. "Please, Ashlyn, let Magnus help. You can leave whenever you want, but at least let us make sure you're not going to collapse from internal bleeding the moment you step back into the forest." After a tense moment, Ashlyn nodded and followed Magnus into the healing house. Thorne moved to follow, but Cole caught his arm. "You felt it, the mate bond." It wasn't a question, but Thorne answered anyway. "The moment I saw her, like lightning to the chest." "And her?" "She doesn't feel it yet, or she's blocking it." Cole's assessment was clinical, the voice of a warrior evaluating tactical information. Magnus says broken wolves can't sense mate bonds, too much trauma shutting down their connection to their wolf nature. Then we help her heal. Thorne watched through the window as Magnus began cleaning Ashlyn's wounds. "However long it takes, whatever resources we need, we help her heal." "What about Luna Sarah?" "She already knows. She sent me to find Ashlyn." Thorne's throat tightened. "She's giving us her blessing." Cole searched for words. "That's incredibly generous." "That's Sarah. Always thinking of the pack first." Thorne turned away from the window. "Stay with Ashlyn. Make sure she has everything she needs. I need to update Sarah, then I'll return." He found his mate exactly where he'd left her, propped against pillows in their bed, looking frailer than she had that morning. Owen and Bryn were with her now, his children trying to keep their mother entertained with stories of their day. They looked up when Thorne entered, and he saw the questions in their eyes. They were young, but they weren't stupid. They knew something was changing. "Papa." Bryn, 9 years old and fearless, launched herself at him. "Did you really bring a rogue here? Is she dangerous?" Thorne caught his daughter, held her close. She's not dangerous to us. He searched for words that would make sense to a child. She's someone who needs help, someone who's been hurt and needs a safe place to heal. Like how Mama's sick? Owen's voice was quieter than his sister's, more serious. His 12-year-old eyes held too much understanding for such a young face. Something like that. Thorne set Bryn down, moved to sit on the edge of the bed. Why don't you two go find Cole? He's at the healing house watching over our guest. I bet he'd appreciate some company. The children exchanged glances, a silent communication that came from being siblings who'd faced the world together. Then Bryn grabbed Owen's hand and they left, closing the door softly behind them. In the silence that followed, Sarah studied Thorne's face. You felt it, not a question, a statement of fact. The moment I saw her. Thorne reached for Sarah's hand. Like every story about fated mates, like every legend our grandmothers told, one look and I knew. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes, but she smiled. Good, that's good. Tell me about her. So Thorne told her. About Ashlyn's wariness, her skill in combat, the way she'd survived 3 years as a rogue through cunning and courage. About the ferals that seemed to be hunting her specifically. About her suspicions of Valdis. About the way she'd looked at Silvercrest territory with something like hunger, like a wolf who'd been wandering in the cold and had finally glimpsed firelight. She sounds perfect for you. Sarah's voice was fading, exhaustion claiming her. Stubborn, skilled, and too proud to ask for help. You'll have your hands full. She doesn't feel the bond yet. Magnus says trauma can block it. Then give her time. And reasons to trust. Sarah squeezed his hand weakly. Court her properly, Thorne. Show her what it means to belong to Silvercrest. Show her what it means to be loved by an alpha who puts her needs above his pride. What if she never feels it? What if the bond stays one-sided? Then you love her anyway. Sarah's eyes drifted closed. That's what being fated means. You don't give up. You don't walk away. You fight for her every single day until she understands that she's worth fighting for. The words settled into Thorne's chest like a vow. He stayed until Sarah's breathing evened into sleep, then returned to the healing house to find chaos contained behind calm faces. Magnus had treated Ashlyn's wounds, wrapped her ribs, given her something for the pain. But she'd refused to lie down, refused to rest, and was currently standing by the window looking like a trapped animal seeking escape routes. Ashlyn. Thorne kept his voice gentle. You're safe here. Am I? She turned to face him. Because every instinct I have is screaming that I'm not, that I've walked into a trap and I need to run. That's trauma talking, not instinct. Magnus finished washing his hands, dried them on a towel. You've been living in survival mode for 3 years. Your body doesn't know how to recognize safety anymore, maybe because safety is an illusion. Ashlyn's hands clenched at her sides. Every alpha I've ever trusted has betrayed me. Why should you be different? Because I felt our bond the moment I saw you. Thorne let the truth hang between them. Because you're my fated mate, Ashlyn, even if you can't feel it yet. And I would die before I let anyone harm you. The words shocked her into silence. She stared at him, searching his face for the lie, the trap, the hidden agenda. I don't, she started. I can't. I know, and I'm not asking you to accept it, not yet. Thorne moved closer, careful not to crowd her. I'm only asking for time. Stay tonight. Let your wounds begin healing. Tomorrow, if you still want to leave, I'll escort you back to the border myself. No tricks, no traps. Just... He struggled for the right words. Just give me the chance to prove that not all alphas are like Valdis. Something in her expression cracked. His name on Thorne's lips seemed to unlock a door she'd been keeping closed. What do you know about Valdis? That he's a tyrant who rules through fear. That he declared you a murderer and sent bounty hunters after you. That every pack in the region has been warned not to harbor you. Thorne held her gaze. But I also know that you don't fight like a murderer. You fight like someone who's been protecting others at great cost to yourself. So tell me, Ashlyn, what really happened 3 years ago? She looked away, and for a moment Thorne thought she would refuse to answer. When she spoke, her voice was so quiet he had to strain to hear. I had a daughter. Her name was Kira. The past tense hit like a blow. Go on. She was born with white fur. Albino. Valdis declared her cursed, said the moon had rejected her. He ordered her killed as an infant. Ashlyn's hands trembled, the first sign of vulnerability he'd seen in her. I fought. I killed 3 warriors trying to protect her. Good men who were just following orders, who probably hated what they'd been commanded to do but followed anyway because that's what wolves do. We obey our alphas, even when those alphas are monsters. But Valdis, she broke off, swallowing hard. Her throat worked as she fought for control. He was stronger than me. He always was. He took Kira from my arms while I was still bleeding from the fight. I can still hear her crying, still see her reaching for me. She was only 3 days old. 3 days. And he, the words came out broken now, raw with old agony. He told me she was dead, that he'd thrown her body to the ferals beyond our borders, that her cursed flesh would feed the monsters she'd been born to become. Then he exiled me with a bounty on my head, told every pack in the region that I'd tried to murder him, and had killed 3 loyal warriors in the process. Made me a monster so no one would listen if I tried to tell the truth. Thorne felt rage building in his chest, a cold fury directed at the alpha who could commit such an atrocity. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. How long ago? 6 years. Ashlyn finally looked at him, and the grief in her eyes was bottomless, an ocean of pain that had no shore, no end. She'd be 6 years old now, if she'd lived, old enough to start learning to shift, old enough to laugh and play and ask 1,000 questions, old enough to— Her voice broke completely. Old enough to know her mother's face. I'm sorry. The words felt inadequate, but they were all he had. No mother should lose her child that way. No child should die for something beyond their control. Valdis would disagree. To him, strength is everything. Weakness must be purged, even from infants. Ashlyn's voice turned bitter. That's why he's hunting me now. Because I know what he's capable of. Because I'm proof that he murdered a child. And because as long as I'm alive, there's a chance I'll tell someone who might actually care. I care. Thorne closed the distance between them, stopped just short of touching her, and I swear to you, on my pack and my honor, that if there's even the smallest chance your daughter is alive, I will help you find her. We'll turn over every stone in Valdis's territory until we know the truth. Why? Ashlyn's eyes searched his face. Why would you risk war with another alpha for a rogue you just met? Because you're my mate. Because what he did is an abomination. Because no one should have to face that kind of loss alone. Thorne let all his certainty, all his conviction show in his expression. And because you deserve justice, Ashlyn, you deserve to know the truth about your daughter. Let me help you find it. For the first time since he'd met her, Ashlyn's defensive walls cracked. Her shoulders sagged, exhaustion and pain, and 3 years of carrying impossible grief alone finally overwhelming her ability to stay strong. Thorne stepped forward and caught her as her knees buckled, held her upright when she would have collapsed. I'm tired, she whispered against his chest. I'm so tired of surviving. Then let me carry some of that weight. Thorne adjusted his grip, lifted her carefully despite her protests. You can fight again tomorrow. Tonight you rest. He carried her from the healing house to his own chambers, ignoring Magnus's knowing look and Cole's carefully neutral expression. He laid her in the guest room attached to the Alpha quarters, tucked blankets around her with a gentleness that surprised even himself. She was already half asleep, the pain medication Magnus had given her finally taking effect. As he turned to leave, her hand caught his wrist. Her eyes were barely open, her words slurred. If you're lying, if this is another betrayal, I'll kill you. I know. Thorne covered her hand with his. Sleep now, you're safe. He waited until her breathing evened out, until he was certain she was truly asleep, before allowing himself to acknowledge the magnitude of what he'd just learned. Ashlyn had lost a child, had been exiled for trying to protect that child, had survived 3 years alone, hunted and haunted by a grief that would have broken most wolves. And she was his mate. Thorne returned to his own room where Sarah still slept. He sat in the chair by her bed, head in his hands, and let himself feel the weight of it all. 2 mates, 1 dying and 1 broken. A pack that needed strength and got complexity instead. A war brewing with Valdis that could destroy everything he'd built. But beneath the weight was something else, something that felt like hope. Ashlyn was here, under his protection, sleeping in safety for the first time in years. And tomorrow they would begin the work of uncovering the truth about her daughter, of investigating Valdis and his crimes, of healing the wounds that had been carved into her soul by cruelty and loss. Tomorrow, he would begin proving to her that not all alphas were monsters. Tomorrow, he would start earning the right to call her his mate. But tonight, he sat vigil between his two mates, one present and one faded, one dying and one broken, and prayed to the moon that he was strong enough to do right by them both. Morning came too soon, and not soon enough. Ashlyn woke to sunlight streaming through windows she didn't recognize, in a bed softer than anything she'd slept on in 3 years, with the scent of cooking food drifting through air that smelled of safety instead of threat. The sheets against her skin were clean, smelling faintly of lavender, and something else she couldn't quite name. Cedar, maybe. Something woody and warm that made her think of shelter and permanence. For one disoriented moment, she forgot where she was, forgot the 3 years of sleeping with a knife in her hand, and one ear tuned to the sound of approaching danger. Then memory crashed back like a physical blow. Silvercrest, the Alpha, Thorne, her mate. The words sat heavy in her mind, unwelcome and undeniable. She sat up carefully, testing her limits. Magnus had done exceptional work. The wounds that should have taken weeks to heal felt manageable after just one night under pack care. Through the window she could see Silvercrest waking up, wolves moving between buildings, children being herded toward what looked like a communal eating area, the organized rhythm of pack life she'd almost forgotten existed. A knock at the door. A young woman entered with a breakfast tray, introducing herself as Mira. "Luna Sarah sent this. She thought you might be hungry." The food was more than one person needed, and Ashlyn understood immediately. This was a test. Accept hospitality or prove herself too damaged to belong. She ate slowly, savoring flavors she'd almost forgotten, and tried not to think about how dangerous it would be to let herself hope. When Thorne arrived later that morning, the sight of him in full daylight hit her harder than she expected. Tall and broad-shouldered, moving with unconscious authority, storm-gray eyes that seemed to see too much, and something in the way he looked at her that made her chest tight. "You're awake." His voice was rough. "How do you feel?" Sore, suspicious, confused. She set down her fork. "Why am I really here, Thorne? There's something else going on." He closed the door, giving her space. "You deserve the truth, all of it. Sarah is dying. Luna's curse. She has perhaps a month left, maybe less." The words landed heavy. "I'm sorry." The pack can feel the bonds fraying. Without a strong Luna, Silvercrest will collapse from within. He turned to face her. "The curse demands a true heir born from fated mates. Sarah and I, we chose each other politically. We were never fated, and so the curse has teeth." Understanding dawned cold. "And you think she chose us?" "I know she did." The certainty in his voice was absolute. "I felt the mate bond the moment I saw you. Sarah knows. She sent me to find you. She's giving us her blessing." Ashlyn stood abruptly. "No, I won't be some convenient solution to your succession problem." "You wouldn't be." Thorne's voice was gentle but firm. "Sarah was never my fated mate. You are. That's not settling. That's destiny finally catching up." "I don't believe in destiny." She moved toward the door. "I believe in survival, in choice, in actions and consequences." "Then believe in this." He was suddenly in her path. "I would have been drawn to you even without the mate bond. You're strong and skilled and brave. You survived 3 years alone in conditions that would have killed most wolves. You're exactly the kind of wolf I would choose, bond or no bond." The words did something dangerous to her walls. "Stop." "Stop what?" "Stop telling you the truth?" He reached out slowly, brushed his fingers across her cheek. "Your heart is racing. You feel the pull even if you can't name it yet." She jerked back. "I feel gratitude. I feel confusion. I feel fear because every time I've trusted an alpha, I've been betrayed." "Fair enough." Thorne lowered his hand. "Then let me earn your trust. Stay here, not as my mate, but as my guest. 2 weeks. Let me show you what Silvercrest is. Let me help you investigate what happened to Kira. If at the end you still want to leave, I'll escort you to the border and make sure Valdis's hunters never find you." The offer was more generous than expected. 2 weeks, she could give him that. 1 week, she countered. 2, you need time to heal properly. Time to understand what you'd be walking away from. His voice dropped lower. "And time for me to prove I'm not like him." Finally, she nodded. 2 weeks. You help me find information about Kira, I'll help you with the ferals. Then I decide. 2 weeks to start, Thorne agreed. I'll take it. The days that followed established a rhythm Ashlyn hadn't experienced in years. Mornings meant healing sessions with Magnus, his skilled hands and pack magic accelerating her recovery. The old healer worked with methodical precision, explaining each herb and treatment as he applied them. "This is wolfsbane extract, diluted and purified," he said on day 2. "In high doses, it's poison, but in small amounts, it speeds cellular regeneration. Your ribs should be fully healed in a week instead of a month." By day 3, her ribs were merely sore instead of agonizing. By day 5, she could move without wincing. By day 7, Magnus declared her fit for light training, though he cautioned against overexertion. Afternoons belonged to Cole. The ex-Marine took her training seriously, but it wasn't the brutal conditioning she'd endured under Valdis. This was strategic, tactical, designed to hone existing skills rather than break and remake her. On day 4, they sparred in the training yard while other warriors watched. "Your combat style is unusual," Cole said as they circled each other. "Not standard pack training. Where'd you learn to move like that?" "I was trained by the old guard in Blackthorn before Valdis purged them." Ashlyn blocked his strike, countered with one of her own that he barely deflected. They believed in efficiency over showmanship. Kill fast, move faster, survive at all costs. Good philosophy. He pressed the attack, testing her defenses. "I served 8 years in the Marines, saw action in Afghanistan, Iraq, places where hesitation meant death. When I found my way to Silvercrest after my first shift, Thorne recognized what I could bring. Let me train his warriors the way I'd been trained, blend human military tactics with wolf instincts." They fought for another 10 minutes before Cole called a halt. "You're fast, faster than most wolves I've trained, but you telegraph your knife strikes about half a second before you commit. An experienced opponent will read that and counter. How do I fix it?" "Practice and trust." He helped her to her feet. "You're so used to fighting alone that you're always planning 3 moves ahead in case you need to retreat. In pack warfare, you don't retreat. You trust your packmates to cover your flanks while you commit fully to the kill." The word packmate made her uncomfortable, but she nodded. Over the following days, Cole worked with her on that commitment, on the kind of trust required for coordinated pack combat. It was harder than any physical training, requiring her to suppress instincts that had kept her alive. On day 6, he introduced her to squad tactics. 4 other warriors joined them, and they ran through formation drills. Ashlyn was assigned to a flanking position, responsible for protecting the unit's left side while trusting others to protect her right. The first time an enemy got through her guard during the drill, she panicked, spinning to defend her exposed back. But the warrior behind her had already intercepted the threat. She'd left herself vulnerable to frontal attack for nothing. "You're thinking like a rogue," Cole said after. "That's not criticism, it's observation. Rogues fight alone, pack wolves fight as a unit. You need to learn which one you want to be." The question haunted her. Which did she want to be? The lone survivor who trusted no one, or the pack wolf who had to trust everyone? Over those days, Ashlyn learned Silvercrest's rhythms beyond just combat training. She met Owen and Bryn properly, Thorne's children who were curious but not hostile. Owen was serious and thoughtful at 12, already showing signs of the tactical mind he'd inherited from his father. Bryn was 9 and fearless, asking questions without filter. "Did you really kill 4 ferals by yourself?" Bryn asked on day 5 when she found Ashlyn in the library. "I did, but I nearly died doing it." Ashlyn set down the book she'd been reading, a historical text on pack law. "Your mother and Cole saved my life. Mama says you're going to be our new mother when she goes to the moon." The child's directness was startling. "Are you?" "I don't know," Ashlyn admitted. "That's not something I can promise right now." "But you like Papa, I can tell. You look at him the way he looks at you." "How does he look at me?" "Like you're the most important thing in the world." Bryn climbed into the chair beside her. "Like he'd fight anything to keep you safe. That's how he used to look at Mama before she got sick." The observation sat heavy. Did it bother her that Thorne would love someone else? That another woman would take her mother's place? But Bryn just shrugged. "Mama says love isn't pie. Giving some to you doesn't mean less for us. And she says Papa needs someone strong who can stand beside him. She thinks you're strong enough. Your mother is very wise. She's the best Luna ever." Bryn's eyes filled with tears. "I don't want her to die." Ashlyn found herself pulling the girl close, offering comfort she wasn't sure she knew how to give. "I know. I'm sorry." Owen found them like that, his sister crying in a stranger's arms. For a moment his expression hardened, protective, but then it softened. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for being kind to her." "Of course." Ashlyn released Bryn gently. "Your mother is dying. You're both allowed to be sad about that." "But we also have to be strong," Owen said, echoing words he'd clearly been told many times. "For the pack, for Papa. That's what heirs do. You're 12. You're allowed to be children first, heirs second." Something in Owen's expression cracked then, vulnerability showing through the careful control. "I'm scared. I don't know how to be Beta without Mama to teach me. I don't know how to help Papa when she's gone." Ashlyn thought about her own losses, about the years of grief she'd carried alone. "You don't have to know everything now. You just have to keep moving forward, one day at a time. And you have your father, your sister, your pack. You're not alone." "Will you stay?" Owen's question was direct. "After Mama dies, will you stay and help us?" "I don't know yet, but I promise I'll give it real thought." She also spent time with Sarah. The dying Luna requested her presence daily, and Ashlyn found herself unable to refuse. They talked in Sarah's chambers, sometimes for hours, about everything from pack politics to child rearing to the weight of leadership. "You've been a mother without a child for 3 years," Sarah said on day 6, her voice weak but steady. "Protecting borders, fighting ferals, surviving alone because giving up would dishonor Kira's memory. That's Luna nature. You just haven't had a pack to lead." "I don't know if I'm strong enough." "Strength isn't about never breaking. It's about healing and continuing anyway." Sarah's smile was gentle. "You killed 4 ferals while injured. You've survived 3 years of conditions that would break most wolves. And more importantly, you're sitting here with me despite every instinct telling you to run. That's true strength." On day 8, Sarah asked about Kira. "Tell me about her. What she was like in the 3 days you had her." Ashlyn hadn't talked about Kira in 3 years. The words came slowly at first, then faster. She was tiny. So tiny I was afraid I'd break her just by holding her. But she was strong too. She latched on immediately when feeding, cried loud enough to wake the whole den. Her fur was white, pure white like fresh snow. And her eyes, when they opened that second day, they were gray like mine, like storm clouds. Sarah listened without interruption, letting Ashlyn pour out 3 years of bottled grief. When Ashlyn finally fell silent, tears on her face, Sarah reached out to squeeze her hand. "You'll never stop loving her. That hole in your heart, it doesn't close, but it does get easier to carry. And when you're ready, when you let yourself love again, it won't be replacing her. It'll be honoring her by proving that love doesn't die just because people do." And every evening Thorne found her. Sometimes they walked the territory borders while he explained defensive positions and patrol routes. Sometimes they sat in his study while he taught her about pack law and alliance politics. Sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence, the easiest kind of companionship. On day 7, he took her to a hot spring hidden in the forest. "I come here when I need to think," he said, "when the weight of leadership feels like too much." The water was heated by volcanic activity deep underground, maintaining a perfect temperature year-round. Ashlyn sat on the rocks at the edge, her feet dangling in the water, while Thorne sat beside her. "Tell me about being an alpha," she said. "What's it really like?" "It's like carrying the weight of 80 lives on your shoulders," he said. "Every decision affects them. Every mistake costs them. You can never truly relax because part of you is always monitoring pack bonds, always ready for the crisis that might come." He paused. "But it's also the greatest privilege. Watching pups grow into warriors, seeing families thrive, knowing that your leadership helps create that stability. It's burden and honor in equal measure." "Do you ever regret it?" "Not once. Even now, with Sarah dying and the pack unstable and Valdis threatening war. Because this is my purpose. These are my people. I'd rather carry this weight than live without it." That kind of certainty fascinated her. She'd spent 3 years questioning everything, trusting nothing. But Thorne was anchored in his convictions, certain of his path even when that path was difficult. "What about you?" he asked. "If you could have anything, be anything, what would you choose?" She was quiet for a long moment. 3 years ago, I would have said I wanted my daughter back, wanted my place in Blackthorn restored, wanted vengeance on Valdis. And now? Now I don't know. Part of me still wants those things. But another part? She struggled for words. Another part wonders what it would be like to belong somewhere again, to be part of something bigger than survival, To have people who count on me and people I can count on in return. You could have that here." His voice was careful, not pushing. "If you wanted it." "Maybe, but I'm scared of wanting things. Every time I've wanted something, it's been taken away." "Then we'll start small?" He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and laced his fingers through hers. "Want this. Want one moment at a time. Want breakfast tomorrow morning. Want to train with Cole the day after. Want to see how the story ends before you decide if it's worth staying for." The touch of his hand in hers sent electricity up her arm. She didn't pull away. "Okay, I can want that much." On day 8, he showed her intelligence his scouts had gathered. Reports of Blackthorn movements near their borders. Rumors of other packs experiencing feral attacks. A pattern emerging that suggested coordination rather than random violence. "Valdis is planning something," Thorne said, spreading maps across his desk. "The ferals aren't random. They're strategic, testing defenses across multiple territories simultaneously. Looking for weaknesses," Ashlyn realized, her tactical mind engaging. Finding out which packs respond quickly, which are understaffed, which have vulnerable positions. Gathering intelligence for a larger campaign. But why? What's his endgame? Territory expansion. Maybe alliance building. She studied the maps. Or maybe it's simpler than that. Maybe he's trying to identify which pack to hit first, which alpha to eliminate to scare the others into submission. Could we be the target? You're harboring the rogue he wants dead. You've publicly defied him, and your territory borders his. She met his eyes. "Yes, I think you're the target." That was when they began serious strategic planning. Ashlyn's knowledge of Blackthorn territory proved invaluable. She knew secret paths, old defensive positions, supply routes Valdis relied on. "There's a ravine on your eastern border," she said on day 9, pointing to the map. "You've marked it impassable." "It's not. There's a goat trail along the north wall, barely wide enough for single file but usable. Valdis used it during territorial disputes with the pack that held this land before you. If he attacks, that's how he'll send his elite warriors to flank your main defensive line." Thorne and Cole exchanged glances, heavy with meaning. "That changes everything," Cole said quietly. "If he can flank us there, our whole defensive strategy collapses. So we use it against him." Ashlyn traced the trail on the map. "You know he's coming through there now. Plant your best fighters in ambush positions. Let him think he's being clever while you slaughter his elites in terrain too narrow for them to use their numbers. You just saved dozens of lives with that information," Thorne said, looking at her with something like awe. "I'm tired of people dying because of me. Use what I know, make him pay for every inch." They spent day 10 refining defensive strategies, coordinating with unit leaders, establishing fallback positions, and supply caches. Ashlyn found herself drawn into the planning not as a guest, but as a tactical advisor. Her input was valued, her expertise respected. This is what it feels like, she realized. This is what it means to be part of something. Not just following orders, but contributing, being valued for what you bring, trusting others to use your knowledge wisely. The pack gathering happened on day 11, after Thorne had delayed it to give Ashlyn time to recover and adjust. Now, standing before 80 wolves in the Great Hall, she felt the weight of their judgment, but also the possibility of their acceptance. Thorne addressed them first, explaining how Ashlyn had saved Sarah and the children, how the stories from Valdis were lies, how she'd been exiled for protecting her infant daughter from murder. "Pack members," he said, his voice carrying across the Great Hall. "Some of you know the stories about Ashlyn, that she was declared a murderer, that she's dangerous." He paused. "I've investigated these claims. I've spoken with Ashlyn, and I've concluded that the stories were lies spread by an alpha who wanted to cover his own crimes." The hall erupted in murmurs. Thorne waited for silence. Ashlyn was exiled because she tried to protect her 3-day-old daughter from being murdered for having white fur. She killed 3 warriors in that fight, yes, but in defense of her child. Valdis took that child from her arms, told her the baby was dead, and exiled her to hide his own brutality. Sarah stood then, commanding instant attention despite her weakness. "I believe her. I've looked into her eyes and seen the truth. Ashlyn is under my protection as Luna, and under Thorne's protection as Alpha." An older wolf spoke up. "But if we harbor her, Valdis may consider it an act of war." "Then let him come," Thorne said coldly. "Silvercrest does not abandon those under our protection. We do not sacrifice the innocent to appease tyrants." Sarah gestured for Ashlyn to approach. "Come here. Let me look at you properly." Ashlyn climbed the steps, stood before the dying Luna. Up close, she could see the toll the curse had taken, but Sarah's eyes were clear and kind. "You saved my children." Sarah took Ashlyn's hand. "Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you." "I did what anyone should do. Not everyone believes that." Sarah glanced at Thorne, then back. "He told you about the mate bond?" "Yes." "And you don't feel it yet. That's all right. When you're ready, when you've healed enough, you'll feel what he feels." She squeezed Ashlyn's hand. "I have one request. When I'm gone, when you take my place, love my children as I do." "I can't promise that. I don't even know if I can love again." "Love isn't something that gets taken. It gets buried where it can't hurt you. But it's still there." Sarah looked at Owen and Bryn. "They need someone strong, someone who understands loss and survival. They need you, even if you don't know it yet." Before Ashlyn could respond, a commotion at the hall entrance. A scout burst through, breathing hard, blood on his clothes. "Alpha! Blackthorn warriors at the border, at least 20. They're demanding we surrender the rogue or face consequences." The hall erupted into chaos. Thorne's Alpha authority rolled over the crowd, demanding silence. "Cole, take 10 warriors and meet me at the border. Magnus, prepare the healing house. Everyone else, secure the children and elderly in the deep chambers." He looked at Ashlyn. "You stay here with Sarah and the pack." "No, this is my fight. I won't hide while others risk themselves for me." "You're still healing. You'll be a liability." "I've been fighting Valdis's hunters for 3 years and I'm still alive. I know how they think, how they fight. You need me there." "She's right," Cole said. "If Valdis sent his best, we'll need every advantage." Thorne's jaw tightened. "Then you stay close to me. You don't engage unless I give the order." "Understood." They ran through forest, Cole and 10 warriors keeping pace. The border came into view as dusk settled. 20 Blackthorn warriors stood with torches, all armed. At their head stood Marcus, Valdis's brutal second in command, massive, scarred, smiling when he saw Ashlyn. "Well, well, the little rogue comes out of hiding," Marcus's voice carried. "Valdis sends his regards. He wants you to know he never forgot about you." "Tell Valdis that Silvercrest doesn't take orders from tyrants," Thorne said. "Ashlyn is under my protection. If he wants her, he'll have to come through me." "Happy to arrange that." Marcus drew his blade. "Last chance, Alpha. Surrender the murderer or we'll take her by force." The words were barely out when violence exploded. But this time, it wasn't the chaotic fury of feral animals. This time there was strategy, coordination, the mark of trained warriors executing a planned attack. And there was something horribly wrong that Ashlyn's instincts screamed about before her conscious mind caught up. 3 of the Silvercrest warriors who'd come with them, wolves she'd seen training in the yard over the past 2 weeks, suddenly turned on their packmates. They shifted mid-step, their transformations smooth and practiced, and attacked with vicious efficiency. Not the hesitant strikes of conflicted souls, but the committed violence of those who'd already made their choice and been waiting for this moment. Betrayers. The word crystallized in Ashlyn's mind with cold horror. Valdis had planted spies in Silvercrest months or even years ago, sleeper agents waiting for the signal to activate. It was brilliant in its cruelty, effective in its execution. Trust was a pack's greatest strength, and he'd weaponized it against them. These weren't recent converts bought with coin. These were long-term infiltrators who'd eaten at Silvercrest's table, trained with their warriors, earned their trust over years, all while serving another master. Cole went down under one attacker, a wolf he'd personally trained for 6 months. The betrayal was written on his face even as military instinct took over. He rolled with the momentum, used his attacker's weight against them, came up in a defensive crouch with claws extended. His expression showed shock and rage, but his body was already moving, already adapting to the new threat matrix. Years of combat experience overriding emotional response. But the distraction worked exactly as intended. While Silvercrest warriors dealt with traitors in their midst, while trust shattered and pack attention turned inward, Blackthorn warriors surged forward across the border, 20 of them moving as one coordinated unit, crossing into Silvercrest territory without permission, violating sacred pack law that had stood for centuries. This wasn't a skirmish. This was an invasion, small-scale but deliberate, designed to test responses and identify weaknesses for the larger assault to come. Ashlyn moved without thought, without the careful calculation that had kept her alive for 3 years. Every survival instinct screamed at her to run, to fade into the forest, to let the packs fight while she escaped. But she'd spent 2 weeks with these wolves, had trained with Cole, laughed with Bryn, listened to Sarah's wisdom, felt the first stirrings of belonging after 3 years of isolation. She was tired of running, tired of hiding, tired of watching good people pay the price for her survival. Every time she'd chosen safety over action, someone else had bled for it. Not this time. Not these people who'd offered her sanctuary when they had no obligation to do so. Her knife was in her hand before conscious decision, the familiar weight centering her, and she was moving forward, not back, closing distance instead of creating it. Years of rogue survival had taught her that retreat was sometimes necessary, but there came moments when the only path forward was through. Moments when you had to stand and fight or lose everything worth fighting for. She targeted Marcus, the biggest threat, the most dangerous piece on the board. He was distracted, barking orders to his warriors in the guttural battle language of Blackthorn Pack, coordinating their assault with the precision of someone who'd done this before. Too many times before. Too many packs broken, too many territories claimed, too many wolves killed on his orders. She moved through his blind spot, using shadows and the chaos of battle as cover, her footsteps silent on pine needles, every movement economical and purposeful. Her blade found the gap between his armor plates before he'd fully registered her approach. The strike was perfect, angled upward between the 4th and 5th ribs, deep enough to wound but not kill, designed to disable his left arm and reduce his combat effectiveness by 30%. She'd learned anatomy from the old guard, knew exactly where to cut to maximize damage while conserving energy for the next fight. He howled, more in anger than pain, and backhanded her with his right hand hard enough to send her flying across the clearing. The world spun, inverted, became a blur of trees and stars, and pain as physics took over. She hit an oak trunk with bone-jarring impact, felt something crack that Magnus had just finished healing 2 days ago, heard the distinctive sound of ribs breaking, and knew her carefully managed recovery had just been undone. Blood filled her mouth, copper and salt, and her vision grayed at the edges as her brain struggled to process the trauma. But she was already rolling to her feet, already moving, because staying still meant dying. Because in combat, there was no pause button, no time out to catch your breath. You moved or you died, and she'd spent 3 years choosing movement over death. That instinct was too deeply ingrained to fail her now. Thorne fought like something out of legend, like the alphas from old stories told to frighten children and inspire warriors. His alpha wolf was massive, black as midnight with eyes that glowed amber, and he moved through Blackthorn warriors like a force of nature. Each strike was precise, economical, designed to kill or disable without wasted motion. He'd been fighting for 24 years, since his first shift at 18, and every moment of that experience showed. But even he couldn't be everywhere at once. Even he couldn't stop 3 wolves from breaking through the defensive line and heading straight for Ashlyn while she struggled to regain her footing. She braced herself, knowing she couldn't win this fight, but determined to make them work for it. Her knife was steady in her hand despite the pain, despite the blood dripping from her mouth, despite knowing that 3 trained warriors against 1 injured rogue had only one possible outcome. But she'd die standing, die fighting, die proving that Valdis had been wrong to call her weak. Then Cole was beside her, having dispatched his betrayer with brutal efficiency. He'd shifted back to human form, twin swords in his hands, his movements carrying the precision of 8 years in the Marines and 6 years training Silvercrest warriors. Blood ran from the gash across his face, the wound already sealing with pack magic, but leaving a scar that would mark him permanently as one who'd faced betrayal and survived. "Together," he said simply. 2 against 3. I've faced worse odds in Fallujah. "Together," she agreed, falling into defensive stance beside him. They fought as a unit, Ashlyn's speed and precision complementing Cole's strength and tactical awareness. She went low while he went high, targeting legs and creating openings he exploited ruthlessly. He drew attacks she could counter from unexpected angles. They'd trained together for a week, had developed the beginnings of combat synchronization that took most warriors months to achieve. Now that training paid dividends. The fight couldn't have lasted more than 5 minutes, but it felt like hours. Each second stretched into infinity, each movement analyzed and executed with split-second timing. When the last Blackthorn warrior fell or fled back across the border, when the 3 traitors lay dead at their own packmates' feet, blood soaking into ground they'd sworn to defend, Ashlyn found herself on her knees once again, bleeding from a dozen new wounds, ribs broken again, exhausted beyond measure, but alive, still alive. Thorne was there instantly, shifting back to human form and pulling her into his arms despite her protests, despite the blood and mud and chaos around them. "You're alive. Thank the moon, you're alive." His hands moved over her with desperate urgency, checking for serious damage, his touch gentle despite his obvious fear. She could feel him trembling, could sense the terror he'd felt watching her fight, watching her take hits that should have killed her. For a male who'd spent decades controlling every emotion, every reaction, maintaining the stoic facade that alphas were expected to project, his fear for her was naked and raw and undeniable. "I told you I could fight." Her attempt at humor fell flat when she coughed and blood spattered her lips, painting his chest with crimson. Broken rib had punctured something. Not good. She'd felt this before, knew the distinctive pain of internal bleeding, the way your body went cold from the inside out as blood pooled where it shouldn't be. Knew she had maybe 30 minutes before shock set in, maybe an hour before the damage became irreversible. "Magnus is on his way. Just hold on. Stay with me, Ashlyn. Don't you dare leave me now." Thorne lifted her carefully, cradling her against his chest like she weighed nothing, like she was precious and fragile instead of a rogue who'd just killed 3 trained warriors. Around them, the others were gathering bodies, treating wounds, dealing with the grim aftermath of battle. The forest floor was painted with blood from both sides, littered with the dead and dying. Cole had a gash across his face that would scar permanently, a mark of betrayal he'd carry forever. But he was still standing, still coordinating defensive positions in case Marcus regrouped for a second wave. Most of the Silvercrest warriors had survived, though several were badly injured and would spend weeks in Magnus's care. 3 of their own lay dead, the traitors who'd chosen Valdis over their adopted pack. Their betrayal stung worse than any physical wound, would leave scars on pack trust that might never fully heal. "The 3 traitors," one warrior asked, voice shaking with rage and grief, and the kind of betrayal that cut deeper than any blade. "Brothers we'd trained with, eaten with, trusted with our lives. What do we do with them? Mark them as oath-breakers and leave them for the carrion eaters." Thorne's voice was cold, harder than Ashlyn had heard it before, carrying the weight of absolute authority and controlled fury. This was the alpha who could make brutal decisions when necessary, who understood that some betrayals couldn't be forgiven, that some crimes demanded harsh justice. They betrayed their pack for coin or coercion or whatever Valdis offered them. Let them serve as warning to anyone else who considers doing the same. Strip them of pack marks and leave them where they fell. They don't deserve the honor of burial rites or the comfort of knowing their names will be remembered with anything but shame. They were halfway back to the den, Thorne's long strides eating up ground while trying not to jostle her too much, when Ashlyn spoke again. Her voice was weak but urgent, forcing words past the blood in her throat and the pain that made breathing agony. "Thorne, this was a distraction." "What?" He slowed but didn't stop, his arms tightening around her protectively. Marcus never expected to win. The attack was too straightforward, too obvious. He was too confident, too sloppy in his tactics for someone of his experience and reputation. She coughed again, fought to stay conscious through the gray fog creeping into her vision, the edges of the world going fuzzy and distant. This was about testing your defenses, finding your weaknesses, identifying your best fighters, seeing how you respond to infiltration, measuring your response time and coordination. The real attack is coming, and when it does, Valdis will use everything he learned here tonight. When? The single word was sharp with understanding. Thorne had been an alpha long enough to recognize good intelligence when he heard it, to know when a tactical assessment came from experience rather than speculation. Days, not weeks. Ashlyn's vision was graying at the edges, darkness pressing in from all sides like a tide she couldn't fight. And when it does, Valdis will come himself. He's done playing with pawns and proxies. He wants me dead, wants it badly enough that he'll risk open war with a respected pack. He'll burn Silvercrest to ash to make it happen, kill anyone who stands between him and his target. This isn't about territory or resources. It's about pride, about proving that no one defies him and lives. Then we'll be ready. Thorne held her tighter, his voice dropping to something intimate, meant only for her despite Cole and the others nearby. And when he comes, we'll end him. Together. You and me, fighting side by side like we did tonight. I promise you, Ashlyn, he won't take you from me. I won't let him. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that Silvercrest's strength would be enough, but she'd seen what Valdis was capable of when he wanted something badly enough, had witnessed the depths of cruelty he'd descend to in pursuit of his goals. She'd watched him order a 3-day-old infant killed without hesitation or remorse, had seen him exile her with a smile, knowing she'd likely die alone in the wilderness, had spent 3 years evading his hunters, each one more skilled and determined than the last, and right now he wanted her dead more than anything else in the world, wanted it with the single-minded focus of a predator who'd been denied his kill for too long, whose pride had been wounded by her continued survival. The last thing she heard before unconsciousness claimed her was Thorne's voice, rough with emotion, making a promise she hoped he could keep. I won't let him take you. I'll die before I let him hurt you again. You're mine, Ashlyn. Mine to protect, mine to cherish. Mine. And in that moment, as darkness pulled her under like a tide she couldn't fight, Ashlyn realized something that terrified her more than any enemy, more than Valdis's hatred or the coming war, or even the possibility of death. She believed him. Against all reason, against all experience, against every lesson, 3 years of survival had beaten into her bones. She believed that this alpha would keep his word, that he would fight for her, protect her, maybe even die for her if it came to that he saw her not as a burden or a political solution or a convenient answer to his succession problem, but as something worth defending, something worth dying for. The walls she'd spent 3 years building weren't just trembling anymore. They were starting to crack, fissures spreading through carefully constructed defenses like fractures in ice, and she didn't know if she had the strength to repair them or if she even wanted to anymore. When Ashlyn woke again, it was to the familiar scent of Magnus's healing house and the less familiar sensation of being surrounded by pack presence. Not threatening, not hostile, but watchful, protective. She opened her eyes to find herself in a private room, afternoon sunlight slanting through windows, and Thorne asleep in a chair beside her bed. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, tension evident even in sleep. One hand stretched across the blanket toward hers, as though he'd been holding it and only recently let go. His clothes were still stained with blood, both his own and others, and she could see fresh bandages peeking from beneath his torn shirt collar. He'd been injured in the fighting, but hadn't bothered to fully tend his own wounds before coming to watch over her. The realization did something to her chest, made it tight in a way that had nothing to do with her healing ribs. How long have you been here? Her voice came out rough, throat dry. Thorne's eyes opened immediately, storm gray and filled with such relief it was almost painful to witness. 2 days. You've been unconscious for 2 days. Magnus said your body was pushed past its limits. The lung puncture was worse than we thought, internal bleeding extensive. He leaned forward, reached for her hand slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. You almost died, Ashlyn. 3 times on the journey back, Magnus had to restart your heart. But I didn't. She tried for a smile. I'm harder to kill than that. Don't. His grip tightened. Don't joke about it. Don't make light of watching you bleed out in my arms, feeling your heartbeat fade through the pack bond I have no right to. Knowing I brought you into danger, you would have avoided if you'd never met me. I made my own choices. Ashlyn shifted carefully, testing her injuries. Magnus had worked miracles again. The pain was manageable, breathing easier. I chose to fight. I chose to stand with your pack. That's not on you, Thorne. That's on me. You shouldn't have had to choose at all. His voice was rough with guilt. You should have been safe. You should have been protected. You should have had 3 years of peace, not 3 years of running. You should have, he broke off, jaw tight. Your daughter should be alive. And the fact that she's not, that you've suffered all this because one tyrant decided an infant's life meant nothing. That's the real crime here. Ashlyn was quiet for a long moment. Do you know what the hardest part was? Not the exile, not the hunters, not even the grief. though that was crushing enough. It was the silence, being completely alone with my thoughts, with my memories, with no one to talk to about Kira, no one who remembered her, no one who could say her name without it being an accusation. She met his eyes. You're the first person in 3 years who's talked about her like she mattered, like her death was a tragedy instead of an inconvenience. She did matter. Thorne's voice was fierce. Every life matters, especially the ones we're supposed to protect, and any alpha who can't see that doesn't deserve the title. The door opened and Magnus entered, followed by Cole. The healer's expression was professionally neutral, but his eyes showed relief when he saw Ashlyn awake and coherent. "You're tougher than most warriors I've treated," he said, moving to check her bandages. "Whatever you survived out there in the wilderness, it forged you into something remarkably hard to break." Cole approached the other side of the bed, his face now bearing a fresh scar from temple to jaw where the traitor's claws had caught him. Ashlyn's gaze went to it and he smiled grimly. "Badge of honor. Proof I survived betrayal and learned from it." His expression softened. "Thank you, by the way, for fighting with us, for trusting us enough to stand and not run." "I'm not sure trust is the right word." Ashlyn shifted higher against the pillows. "More like momentum. Once you start fighting, it's hard to stop. Whatever it was, it saved lives." Cole's tone turned serious. "The pack wants to thank you formally. Sarah wants to see you when you're strong enough. And Thorne has been sitting vigil since we got you stabilized, refusing to leave, refusing to sleep properly." "I slept," Thorne protested. 2 hours in 3 days doesn't count." Magnus's voice was stern. "You're an alpha, not immortal. Your pack needs you functional, which means you need rest. Go clean up, eat properly, check in with your children who are worried sick. I'll watch Ashlyn." The fact that Thorne actually stood and obeyed spoke to how much he trusted Magnus, but he paused at the door, looked back at Ashlyn. "I'll return tonight, if that's acceptable." "It's acceptable." The words came easier than she expected. "And Thorne, thank you for keeping your promise." His expression transformed, the exhaustion falling away to reveal something raw and real. "Always. For you, Ashlyn. Always." After he left, Magnus worked in silence for several minutes, checking wounds, changing bandages, mixing medicines. Cole stood watch by the window, giving them space but remaining present. Finally, the healer spoke. "He's falling in love with you, if he hasn't already fallen completely." Magnus's tone was matter-of-fact. "I've known Thorne since he was 18. I've seen him in battle, in leadership, with Sarah, with his children. I've never seen him like this desperate, this devoted, this willing to let himself be vulnerable. That's what scares me." Ashlyn watched his skilled hands work. "I don't know how to be what he needs. I don't know how to be Luna, how to mother children who aren't mine, how to lead a pack when I've been alone for so long. What if I fail them? What if you succeed?" Magnus met her eyes. "What if you're exactly what they need and you just can't see it yet?" Strength comes in many forms. Sarah led with wisdom and diplomacy. You could lead with the same fierceness that kept you alive for 3 years, the same refusal to quit that has you surviving injuries that would kill trained warriors. Cole spoke from the window. "The pack respects you. After watching you fight yesterday, after seeing you stand with us when you had every reason to run, they respect you. That's more than most new Lunas have when they start." "But I haven't accepted being Luna." Ashlyn's protest felt weak even to her own ears. "Not yet." Magnus finished with the bandages. "But you will, because you're not the type to walk away from people who need you. You proved that when you saved Sarah and the children. You proved it again yesterday when you fought beside us. And you'll prove it again when Valdis comes for real, because we both know yesterday was just reconnaissance." "How long?" The question she'd been avoiding. "How long until the real attack?" "Days. Maybe a week if we're lucky." Cole's assessment was grim. Marcus got what he came for. He knows our response time, our defensive capabilities, our numerical weakness. He identified 3 traitors we didn't know about. When Valdis strikes, he'll come with everything he has. Then we use the time we have. Ashlyn pushed herself more upright despite Magnus's protest. "We prepare, we plan, we make sure every wolf knows what's at stake and what we're fighting for." Her gaze was steady. "And when he comes, we end this. Permanently." The 2 males exchanged glances. That's Luna thinking right there, Cole said quietly. That's the kind of decisive leadership packs follow into hell and back. I'm not Luna yet. No, Magnus smiled, but you're getting there. Over the following days, Ashlyn healed under Magnus's care while the pack prepared for war. She watched from her window as defensive positions were reinforced, as Cole drilled warriors in new formations designed to counter the betrayal tactics Valdis had employed. She observed Thorne coordinating with scouts, establishing supply lines, preparing for siege, and every evening, as promised, Thorne came to her room. Sometimes they talked about strategy, sometimes about Kira, Thorne gently asking her to share memories, helping her process grief she'd carried alone for too long. Sometimes they sat in comfortable silence, his presence more soothing than any medicine Magnus provided. On day 13, Sarah sent for her. The Luna had deteriorated visibly in the days since the attack, the curse accelerating as stress and anxiety took their toll. But her mind remained sharp, her wisdom intact. "You're healing well," Sarah observed as Ashlyn settled into the chair beside her bed. "Magnus says you'll be ready for light duty in another day. If there's time before Valdis attacks." "There won't be." Sarah's assessment was blunt. "He'll come soon, within the week. And when he does, I won't be here to help defend." She gestured weakly to her wasted body. "The curse is winning. I have days left, maybe hours." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. I've made peace with it. What I haven't made peace with is leaving my children without a mother, my mate without a Luna, my pack without female leadership at the worst possible time." Sarah's amber eyes fixed on Ashlyn. "Which is why I need to know you'll stay. Not for Thorne, though that matters. Not for the mate bond, though that's real whether you feel it yet or not. But for them. For Owen and Bryn, who need someone strong. For the pack, who needs stability. Will you stay?" Ashlyn was quiet, processing the weight of what was being asked. Finally, truthfully, she answered, "I don't know if I can be what they need. That's not what I asked." Sarah's voice held gentle steel. "I asked if you'll stay, if you'll try. The rest, the being perfect, the knowing exactly what to do, that comes with time and experience. No one is ready to be Luna. We just do it anyway and hope we don't break too much in the process." The honesty was refreshing. Most leaders pretended to have all the answers. "If I stay, I won't be like you. I won't be diplomatic or patient or politically savvy." "Good," Sarah smiled. "Be like you. Be fierce and honest and unwilling to accept injustice. That's what they need now. A Luna who will fight for them the way you fought for your daughter. A Luna who understands that love means protecting others at cost to yourself." The words settled deep. "I'll stay. At least until the battle is over. Until I know they're safe." "That's enough for now." Sarah relaxed against her pillows. "The rest will come. And Ashlyn, thank you for giving an old wolf peace at the end, for proving that my last act as Luna, sending Thorne to find you, was the right choice." They sat together in companionable silence as afternoon faded to evening. Two women from different worlds united by their love for the same people, making plans for a future only one of them would see. Ashlyn woke to voices arguing in hushed tones. The sound pulled her from dreams of Kira's face and Valdis's cruelty. She catalogued injuries by instinct. Ribs wrapped tight, painful but manageable. Punctured lung healed enough that breathing didn't feel like drowning. She'd been unconscious for 3 days this time, her body pushed past its limits. The voices grew clearer, Thorne and Cole discussing strategy with grim efficiency. "We can't hold the entire territory if Valdis brings his full force," Cole said. "We're outnumbered 3-1. Then we consolidate, fall back to defensive positions, use terrain where numbers matter less than positioning." Thorne's response was measured. "Better the land than the people. We can rebuild territory. We can't resurrect the dead." "What about Ashlyn? He'll want her specifically. Then we make sure he doesn't get her. She fights with us if able, but she's protected at all costs. If the battle turns, she goes north to Ironheart Pack." "You think she'd run? That woman fought Marcus while bleeding internally." "No, but I'll drag her to safety myself if I have to. Love means keeping someone alive, even if they hate you for it." The word love hung in the air. Ashlyn lay processing what it meant that he'd said it so casually, like devotion was as fundamental as breathing. She sat up carefully. Magnus's healing work was exceptional. 3 days of pack magic had done what should have taken weeks. She moved to the window. Silvercrest had transformed. What had been a peaceful village now bristled with defensive preparations. Warriors drilled, barricades were constructed, children and elderly were being moved to deep caves. Everyone had a role, a purpose. This was a pack preparing for war. A knock preceded Sarah's entrance. The Luna looked frailer than ever, skin almost translucent, but her eyes were sharp. "You're awake. Good, we need to talk." "You should be resting. I'll rest when I'm dead, which won't be long now." Sarah lowered herself into a chair with visible effort. "Thorne loves you. I doubt he said it directly because he's terrible with emotions, but he does, completely, in the way fated mates love when the bond is acknowledged." "I don't feel it." The words came defensive. "Blocked, not broken. You've been traumatized, shaped by loss. Your wolf has retreated deep inside, but she's still there, Ashlyn, and she recognizes her mate even if your conscious mind resists." "How do you know?" "Because I've watched you watch him. You track his movements without realizing it. Your breathing changes when he enters a room. Your body knows even if your mind hasn't caught up." Ashlyn wanted to deny it but couldn't. "Even if that's true, I don't know how to be someone's mate. I don't know how to be Luna." "Do you know what Luna really means?" Sarah asked. "Mother, protector, the one who holds the pack together when the alpha must focus on external threats. You've been a mother without a child for 3 years, Ashlyn, surviving alone, fighting ferals, protecting borders because giving up would dishonor Kira's memory. You already know how to do this. You just don't trust yourself." The words hit hard. "What if I fail? What if Valdis destroys everything and it's my fault?" "Then you'll have fought beside people who chose to fight for you. That's not failure. That's honor." Sarah stood slowly. "Now get dressed. Cole is waiting to brief you on defensive strategy." The days that followed blurred together. Day 15 and 16 were recovery. Day 17 through 21 were intensive preparation. Ashlyn worked with Cole refining defensive positions, with Magnus preparing emergency medical protocols, with Thorne coordinating supply lines and evacuation routes. On day 19, standing on the walls beside Thorne as dusk fell, she asked, "How do you lead knowing people will die?" "By remembering more would die if I gave no orders at all. Leadership isn't about preventing death. It's about making death mean something. Every warrior knows the risks. They choose to stand anyway. Even if it cost you everything? Especially then." His hand found hers. "Some things are worth dying for. You taught me that when you fought to protect Kira. You've been fighting this war longer than any of us. Now you just have an army at your back." The attack came at dawn on day 22. Valdis didn't bother with subtlety. Over 100 warriors emerged from the tree line in full battle formation. Blackthorn wolves mixed with allied packs, all committed to destroying Silvercrest and claiming Ashlyn. Thorne stood on the walls, power radiating from him in waves. "Valdis of Blackthorn, you violate pack law by bringing war to my territory. Withdraw now and I'll consider clemency." Valdis shifted to human form, exactly as Ashlyn remembered. Cruel eyes, hard features. "Clemency? I'm not here for clemency, Thorne. I'm here for what's mine. That rogue killed my warriors, dishonored my pack. Give her to me and your pack lives. She's not property. She's under my protection. If you want her, you'll have to go through every wolf in Silvercrest." "So be it." Valdis raised his hand and his army surged forward. The battle that followed would be remembered in pack histories for generations to come. Valdis's forces hit the main defensive line with overwhelming power, exactly as predicted. Wave after wave of warriors crashed against Silvercrest's positions like an ocean tide against rock. But Silvercrest warriors held their ground, disciplined and coordinated after weeks of preparation. They gave ground slowly, grudgingly, making the enemy pay dearly for every advance. Each retreat was calculated, each defensive position abandoned only after inflicting maximum casualties. The killing grounds Cole had spent weeks preparing took their brutal toll. Narrow passes forced attackers into confined spaces where superior numbers meant nothing, where 3 defenders could hold against 30 attackers. Hidden archers picked off warriors who broke through the first line, their arrows finding gaps in armor with deadly precision. The river crossing became a slaughterhouse as enemies tried to ford while under constant fire from protected positions. Bodies piled up in the water, turning it red, creating obstacles that slowed subsequent waves. But Valdis was cunning and experienced, a tactician who'd conquered 3 territories before this. He committed enough force to the main assault to keep Silvercrest fully occupied, their attention divided, their resources stretched thin. Meanwhile, his elite warriors, his most skilled and dangerous fighters, slipped toward the eastern ravine with confidence born of secret knowledge. They believed their hidden path would deliver them behind enemy lines, that they'd cut through Silvercrest's rear guard and hit the defenders from behind while the main force pressed from the front. It was classic hammer and anvil tactics, proven effective across centuries of warfare. Instead, they found hell waiting with their names on it. Ashlyn led the ambush personally, crouched among rocks with 20 of Silvercrest's finest warriors. They'd been in position since before dawn, muscles cramping from hours of motionless waiting, but discipline holding. These were Cole's hand-picked veterans, wolves who understood that patience in ambush was as important as ferocity in combat. They waited in absolute silence while enemy elites filed below, vulnerable and exposed in the narrow ravine, confident in their secret path, completely unaware that their secret had been betrayed. When the last warrior entered the kill zone, when the entire enemy force was committed to the narrow trail with no room to maneuver and no possibility of retreat, Ashlyn gave the signal. A single raised hand, reflected by moonlight, seen by 20 pairs of eyes trained to watch for it. The slaughter was efficient and brutal, and over almost before it began. Arrows first, fired from above, taking down the leaders and creating chaos in the ranks. Then warriors dropping from the rocks like avenging angels, using gravity and surprise to devastating effect. The ravine became a perfect trap, the narrow trail preventing escape or reinforcement, the steep walls funneling enemies into kill zones carefully prepared over days of planning. In 15 minutes of coordinated violence, 30 of Valdez's best fighters were dead or dying, blood painting the rocks red, and not a single Silvercrest warrior had been seriously injured. Ashlyn stood over this carnage, breathing hard, her wolf form spattered with enemy blood, and felt something fundamental shift inside her. This was pack warfare in its purest form. Not a rogue fighting alone, surviving by wit and desperation, but warriors coordinated and committed, protecting each other, functioning as a single organism with shared purpose. This was what she'd lost when Valdez exiled her 6 years ago. This was what Thorne and Silvercrest offered, if she was brave enough to accept it, to open herself to the vulnerability that came with belonging. The main battle raged for hours as the sun climbed higher and afternoon heat made armor feel like ovens. Valdez's numbers were overwhelming, a 3-to-1 advantage that should have crushed any defense. But Silvercrest's defensive strategy held against all odds. As afternoon wore into evening, as shadows lengthened and warriors on both sides fought with exhaustion threatening to overwhelm training, the enemy began to falter. Their elite warriors never emerged from the ravine as planned. Their frontal assault was bleeding them dry against prepared defenses that gave nothing easily. Morale was cracking, the certainty of victory evaporating like morning mist. That's when Valdez himself led a desperate charge against the main gate, his massive alpha form tearing through wooden barriers like paper, trying to break Silvercrest's will by sheer violence and personal power. And that's when Thorne met him, alpha to alpha, in combat that would decide everything. The fight between alphas was primal and terrible, two massive wolves locked in combat, both experienced, both powerful, neither willing to yield. They fought with savage intensity that cleared ground around them. This wasn't just about territory. This was about dominance, about which vision of pack leadership deserved to survive. Ashlyn watched from the walls, her heart in her throat. The fight was too close, too even. When Valdez landed a critical hit, his claws raking across Thorne's throat, opening wounds that sprayed blood across stone, something inside Ashlyn shattered. The block that had kept her wolf dormant, that had prevented her from feeling the mate bond, cracked and fell away like ice in spring thaw. The bond slammed into her with physical force. She felt Thorne's pain as her own, a searing agony across her throat. She felt his determination, his fear not for himself, but for her safety. She felt the love he'd been projecting, the absolute certainty that she was his mate. And underneath it all, she felt her wolf stirring for the first time in 6 years, roaring to life with desperate need to protect their mate. Ashlyn shifted. The transformation was painful after years of suppression, bones reforming, fur erupting across skin. Her wolf was smaller than Thorne's, lithe and quick, coat the color of storm clouds. But she was fast, faster than any wolf on the battlefield, driven by fury that had been building for 6 years. She launched herself from the wall, clearing 30 feet in a single bound, and hit Valdis mid-strike. The impact separated the alphas, gave Thorne space to recover. Valdis spun on her, recognition and rage warring in his eyes. "You!" His mental voice was filled with venom. "You should have died years ago. My place was never under your paw." Ashlyn circled, movements fluid. "You murdered my daughter. You exiled me for protecting her. You spent 6 years hunting me. She was defective, unworthy of life. Valdis's certainty was absolute. I did what needed doing." "No." Thorne rose, bloodied but not broken. "You did what monsters do. You killed an innocent child because she was different. That's not strength, that's cowardice." Valdis roared and charged at Thorne. But Ashlyn was faster. She intercepted him, her smaller size letting her get under his guard, and her teeth found his throat. Not a killing blow yet, but a hold that immobilized him. Thorne joined her, his jaws closing on Valdis's spine, and together they bore the enemy alpha to the ground. The battlefield fell silent. Both armies stopped fighting to watch. "Yield," Thorne commanded. "Withdraw your forces, accept exile, or die here and now." Valdis struggled, but they held him fast. His warriors watched their alpha defeated. Some looked relieved, others horrified, but none moved to intervene. "Never!" Valdis's mental voice was defiant. "I am alpha. I don't yield to lesser wolves." "Then you die." Ashlyn's thought was cold. "For Kira, for every pup you murdered, for every wolf you exiled." She bit down, felt bone crack, felt the alpha who'd destroyed her life go limp beneath her jaws. When she released him, Valdis's body shifted back to human form, lifeless eyes staring at nothing. His warriors stared in shock. Without their alpha, they were just wolves who'd followed orders. One by one, they laid down weapons and knelt in submission. The battle was over. Silvercrest had won. Ashlyn shifted back to human, swaying with exhaustion. Thorne caught her, pulled her close. "You shifted. You felt the bond. I felt you dying." She looked up at him. "I felt what you've been feeling. I felt my wolf wake up because she couldn't let our mate die." "Our mate." He repeated the words like they were precious. "You accept it now? I'm terrified of it. But I want to try. I want to stop running and start living. With you. With Silvercrest. That's all I've ever wanted." Thorne kissed her then, deep and thorough, a claiming and a promise. When they broke apart, the pack was howling, celebration and grief mixed together. The days that followed were a blur. Wounded were treated, dead were honored, prisoners were processed. The Blackthorn warriors who'd betrayed Silvercrest were formally exiled. The remaining Blackthorn warriors were given a choice to return home and rebuild or seek sanctuary elsewhere. Most chose to return, tired of Valdis's cruelty. 1 week after the battle, on day 29 since Ashlyn had first entered Silvercrest territory, the Council of Alphas convened in the Great Hall. 11 alphas and their delegations arrived, representing every major pack in Valdoria. They came in formal dress, their authority evident in bearing and dress. Some were friendly to Thorne, others neutral, a few openly hostile. They gathered not just to judge what had happened, but to decide whether the very foundation of pack law needed changing. The Great Hall had been repaired from battle damage, but signs of recent violence remained. Claw marks on stone pillars, bloodstains that hadn't quite washed clean. A reminder that war had come here, that wolves had died defending principle over expediency. Ashlyn stood before them in simple clothes, no armor, no weapons, just herself and the truth she'd carried for 6 years. She could feel the weight of dozens of eyes evaluating her, these powerful alphas who held the fate of packs in their hands. Thorne stood beside her, a silent presence of support and authority. Cole and Magnus flanked them, witnesses to everything that had occurred. Alara of Ironheart Pack, eldest and most respected of the assembled alphas, called the session to order. Her white hair spoke of 7 decades of leadership, her scarred hands of battles fought and won. "We gather to investigate the events at Silvercrest Pack, the death of Alpha Valdis, the war that was fought, the accusations of tyranny and child murder." She looked at Ashlyn. "You will speak first. Tell us your story from beginning to end, and know that lying before this council carries severe consequences." Ashlyn took a breath and began. She told them everything. The birth of Kira, the white fur that Valdis declared cursed, the order for execution. Her fight to save her 3-day-old daughter, the 3 warriors she'd killed in desperate defense of innocent life. Valdis overpowering her, taking Kira from her arms while she bled on the floor. His words that the child was dead, body thrown to ferals. The exile with bounty on her head, the lies spread to every pack, 3 years of survival alone hunted and hated. She told them about the ferals, about Valdis's chemical experiments turning wolves into monsters, about being tracked, attacked, forced to fight for her life over and over, about the day she saved Sarah and the children, about Thorne offering sanctuary, about 2 weeks of learning to trust again, about Marcus's attack and the battle that had just ended. She spoke plainly, without embellishment or emotional manipulation, just facts, dates, events as they had happened. The hall was silent when she finished, the kind of silence that weighs heavy with significance. Thorne testified next about the feral attacks, about evidence recovered from Blackthorn territory showing coordination and chemical production, about Valdis's weaponization of madness, about the threat posed not just to Silvercrest, but to all packs. Cole presented physical evidence, documents recovered from Blackthorn prisoners showing plans for territorial expansion through systematic conquest, notes about identifying and eliminating wolves deemed defective or disloyal, a ledger of payments made to assassins for kills across multiple territories, the paper trail of a tyrant's reign laid bare for all to see. When testimony ended, arguments began. Some alphas defended traditional authority, saying that an alpha's word should be law within his own territory. Others argued that Valdis had crossed lines that no alpha should cross, that child murder violated the most sacred tenet of pack existence. The debate raged for hours, voices rising and falling, alliances forming and dissolving. Ashlyn stood through it all, watching these powerful wolves argue over whether what had been done to her was justified or criminal, whether her daughter's attempted murder was an alpha's prerogative or an abomination. Finally, Alara stood again, her authority cutting through the noise. "Enough. We have heard testimony. We have seen evidence. Now we will see something else." She gestured to an aide who'd been waiting at the hall's edge. "Bring forward what we found in Valdis's private chambers." The aide approached carrying a wooden box, ornate and locked, clearly something Valdis had valued enough to keep secured. Alara took a key recovered from his body and opened it. Inside were small objects, each carefully tagged with a name and date. Trophies. Not of victories, but of cruelties. A child's toy, broken, a lock of blonde hair, a small carved wolf. And there, near the bottom, something that made Ashlyn's heart stop. A bracelet made of white fur, tiny enough for an infant's wrist, tagged in Valdis's own hand. Kira, albino female pup, 3 days old, sold to Human Family Hartwell for 500 gold, Eastern settlements. Sold, not killed, sold. The word echoed in Ashlyn's mind like thunder. She staggered, would have fallen if Thorne hadn't caught her. Alive. Kira was alive. 6 years of grief, 6 years of guilt and rage and mourning, and her daughter had been alive the entire time. Alara's voice seemed to come from a great distance. "We investigated this lead immediately upon finding it 3 days ago. The Hartwell family still lives in the Eastern settlements. They adopted an infant girl 6 years ago, a child they were told was orphaned. They named her Emma. She's been raised human, has never shifted, has no knowledge of her wolf heritage. But she's alive, healthy, and by all accounts loved and well cared for." Ashlyn couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Alive. Kira was alive. "We've sent messengers to the family," Alara continued. "They've been told the truth about Emma's origins. The choice of whether to meet you, to learn about her heritage, belongs to the girl herself. She's 16 now, nearly an adult by human standards. She'll make her own decisions." Thorne's arms were around Ashlyn, holding her up as the world tilted. "It's not the ending you expected," he murmured in her ear. "But it's not the tragedy you believed. She's alive. Your daughter is alive." The council's vote came swiftly after that revelation. No alpha who saw those trophies, who understood what they represented, could defend Valdis's actions. The motion passed unanimously with only minor debate about specific wording. From this day forward, Alara declared, pack law is changed. Any alpha who orders the death of a pup must answer to this council and provide justification that satisfies a majority vote. Any wolf exiled for protecting children will find automatic sanctuary with allied packs. Any pack that harbors tyrannical leadership will face council intervention. These laws will be enforced. The age of alphas answerable to no one is over. It was change purchased with blood and grief, but it was real change, lasting change, the kind that would protect future generations from suffering as Ashlyn had suffered. That same evening, as the council delegates departed for their respective territories, as the great hall emptied and normal life tried to reassert itself, Sarah's condition deteriorated with frightening speed. The stress of the battle, the anxiety of waiting for its outcome, the knowledge that her time was finally ending, had all accelerated the Luna's curse beyond what even Magnus's considerable skill could counter. She had hours now, not days. Everyone could feel it through the pack bonds, the life force that had sustained them for 20 years, flickering like a candle in strong wind. Ashlyn stood in Sarah's chamber as sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, colors that seemed cruelly beautiful given the circumstances. Thorne stood at the foot of the bed, his face carved from stone, holding emotions in check through sheer force of will. Owen and Bryn sat on either side of their mother, each holding one of her hands, their young faces struggling to process what was happening. They'd known this day was coming, had been preparing for it for months, but knowing and experiencing were entirely different things. Sarah's breathing had become shallow and labored, each breath clearly an effort. Her skin was gray, almost translucent, her body finally giving up the fight it had waged for 6 months. But her eyes, those amber eyes that had seen so much and understood even more, remained clear and focused on each person in the room in turn. "Take care of them." Her voice was barely a whisper, each word costing her energy she didn't have to spare. "All of them. My children who I love more than life itself. My mate who gave me 20 beautiful years. My pack who trusted me to lead them well." She looked at Ashlyn. "Be the Luna they need, not the Luna I was. They don't need a copy of me. They need you, exactly as you are. I promise." Ashlyn knelt beside the bed, took Sarah's free hand gently. "I promise I'll protect them, all of them, with everything I am. Thank you for seeing what I couldn't see in myself. Thank you for being kind when you had every reason to be resentful. Thank you for giving me a home. You gave yourself a home by being brave enough to accept it." Sarah's smile was gentle despite the pain evident in every line of her face. "You were always strong enough, always worthy enough. You just needed time to see it." She squeezed Ashlyn's hand weakly. "Now stop crying and go plan your Luna ceremony. I want to die knowing my pack is in good hands, knowing that Thorne won't be alone, knowing my children will have a mother who understands strength isn't just power, but compassion too." Owen was crying silently, his 12-year-old composure finally cracking. "Mama, I don't know how to be Beta without you. I don't know how to help Papa when you're gone." "You'll learn." Sarah looked at her son with such fierce love it was painful to witness. "You'll make mistakes, and that's all right. Your father made mistakes. I made mistakes. What matters is that you learn from them, that you keep trying, that you remember pack comes before pride." She touched his face gently. "And you won't be alone. You'll have Ashlyn, you'll have your sister, you'll have Cole and Magnus and your father. Ask for help when you need it. That's not weakness. That's wisdom." Bryn was clinging to her mother's other hand, 9 years old and heartbroken. "Who's going to braid my hair? Who's going to tell me stories at night?" "Ashlyn will." Sarah looked at the younger woman. "She doesn't know she's good at those things yet, but she is. Give her time to learn, and be patient with her like you were patient with me when I was learning to be your mother." She kissed Bryn's forehead. "I love you so much, my brave girl. Remember that, always." She passed an hour later, just as full dark settled over the land and the first stars appeared. Her breathing simply stopped, peacefully, with no struggle or pain at the end. Just a quiet slipping away surrounded by everyone she loved. Thorne, who had been holding himself together through iron will, finally broke. He dropped to his knees beside the bed, took his mate's hand, and wept openly in a way Ashlyn suspected he hadn't done since childhood. Owen and Bryn clung to their father, all three of them grieving together, while Ashlyn stood back, giving them space for private sorrow. The pack howled when they felt the Luna bond break, a sound of grief that echoed across mountains and valleys, announcing to all of Valdoria that Silvercrest had lost their Luna. It was a sound of endings and beginnings mixed together, of mourning what was lost while preparing for what would come. Ashlyn felt the pack bonds shift, felt the void where Sarah had been, felt the weight of expectations settling on her shoulders like a physical thing. But Sarah had ensured her successor was ready, willing, and worthy. Her last gift to her pack was preparation for her absence. The Luna ceremony took place the next night, during the full moon that Sarah had predicted weeks ago. According to pack tradition, a new Luna must be named within one lunar cycle of the previous Luna's death, and sooner was considered better for pack stability. So they gathered again, still raw from grief, still processing loss, but ready to move forward because that's what Sarah would have wanted. It was smaller than traditional ceremonies, marked by recent battle and more recent loss, but no less significant for that simplicity. The pack gathered in the sacred grove where ceremonies had been held for 3 generations, where ancient trees formed a natural cathedral and moonlight filtered through leaves like silver rain. Ashlyn knelt in the center of the grove wearing simple white clothing, traditional for Luna ceremonies. Her hair was unbound, falling down her back in dark waves. She was nervous, terrified really, but also ready. Ready to stop running, ready to stop surviving and start living, ready to accept that she deserved this, deserved belonging, deserved family and home and purpose. Thorne stood before her in formal dress, alpha authority radiating from him like heat from fire. Magnus stood beside him, the elder healer ready to perform the ceremony as tradition demanded. The entire pack surrounded them in a circle, witnesses to this transformation. Magnus began with his traditional words, spoken in the old language that predated modern pack customs. Words about duty and sacrifice, about strength and compassion, about leadership that serves rather than dominates. Then he switched to modern language so all could understand. "Ashlyn," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the night stillness. "You come before this pack not by birth but by choice, not by tradition but by trial. You have proven yourself in combat, protecting our Luna and her children when death seemed certain. You have survived 3 years alone that would have broken most wolves. You have shown compassion when cruelty would have been easier, mercy when vengeance was justified." He looked around at the assembled pack. "Does anyone here dispute her worthiness to be Luna?" Silence. Not hostile silence, but the silence of agreement. No one challenged her right to this position. "Then by pack law and Moon's blessing, I mark you as Luna of Silvercrest Pack." Magnus drew a ritual blade, opened a small cut on Ashlyn's palm and one on Thorne's palm. They clasped hands, blood mingling, the physical symbol of pack bonds forming. Ashlyn gasped as power flooded through her. The Luna marks appeared on her skin, glowing faintly in moonlight, intricate patterns that marked her as alpha female, as protector and nurturer, as leader and guide. And with the marks came the pack bonds, suddenly vivid and overwhelming. She could feel every member of Silvercrest, from eldest to youngest, their emotions, their needs, their hopes and fears, all connected to her through invisible threads of pack magic. It was overwhelming and beautiful and terrifying all at once. This was what Sarah had carried for 20 years, this responsibility for 80 souls. Thorne pulled her to her feet, his hand still clasped with hers. His alpha power joined with her Luna authority, creating something stronger than either alone. The mate bond blazed between them, fully realized, no longer one-sided or blocked. When he kissed her to seal the ceremony, officially making her his mate in pack law and tradition, the pack howled again. Not grief this time, but joy, celebration, hope for the future despite recent loss. "Welcome home, Luna Ashlyn," Thorne whispered against her lips. "You are pack now. You are mine, and I am yours, forever." Afterward, in the privacy of their chambers, Thorne pulled her close. "Are you happy?" Ashlyn considered the question. She'd lost so much, survived horrors, been broken and remade, But standing here, feeling pack bonds she'd thought were lost forever, held by a mate who'd fought for her, knowing her daughter was alive somewhere, she found unexpected truth. Yes, I'm happy. Terrified and overwhelmed, but happy. Good, he kissed her forehead, because I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you stay that way. In the weeks that followed, Ashlyn settled into her role as Luna. She worked with Magnus to improve healing protocols. She trained with Cole to maintain defensive readiness. She spent time with Owen and Bryn, earning their trust slowly, becoming not a replacement for their mother, but a different kind of parent. And every evening, she stood on the walls with Thorne and looked out at territory that was now hers to protect. 3 weeks after the Luna ceremony, a messenger arrived. A young woman with dark hair and gray eyes, hesitant but curious. Kira, now calling herself Emma, had come to meet the mother she'd never known. Their reunion was tentative, emotional, complicated. The girl who'd been raised as Emma Hartwell stood in Silvercrest's great hall, human parents flanking her protectively, and looked at Ashlyn with eyes that held 6 years of questions. She was tall for 16, with the lean, athletic build that suggested wolf genetics even without shifting. Her dark hair was cut in a modern style, her clothes decidedly human, but the way she moved held unconscious grace that spoke of something wild waiting beneath the surface. Kira had been raised human, had no memory of her first 3 days of life, had parents who loved her fiercely, and had no idea what to do with the council's revelation that their adopted daughter was supernatural. But she'd wanted to come, her human mother had explained with tears in her eyes. Wanted to meet the woman who'd fought for her, wanted to understand the heritage that explained why she'd always felt different, always dreamed of running on 4 legs through forests she'd never seen. I don't expect you to be my daughter, Ashlyn said carefully, acutely aware of how fragile this moment was. You have parents who raised you, who loved you through scraped knees and first heartbreaks and every milestone I missed. They're your real family. She struggled for words. I'm just the woman who gave birth to you and has spent 6 years grieving what I thought I'd lost. But you fought for me. Emma's voice was quiet but firm. My mom, my human mom, she showed me the council reports. You killed 3 warriors trying to save me. You were exiled, hunted, nearly died multiple times because of choices you made to protect a baby you barely knew. That matters. That means something. You matter. Ashlyn felt tears threatening. You mattered from the moment you took your first breath. And knowing you're alive, that you've had a good life, that you were loved and safe while I was searching, her voice broke. That's the best possible ending to 6 years of nightmare. Can I visit sometimes? Emma asked. Learn about wolves? Maybe figure out how to shift? I've always felt like part of me was sleeping, waiting for something. Maybe this is what I've been waiting for. Anytime. You're always welcome here. Ashlyn glanced at the human couple standing protectively nearby. With your parents' permission, of course. Mrs. Hartwell stepped forward, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and the slight fear of someone confronting forces beyond human understanding. We want what's best for Emma. If learning about her heritage helps her understand herself, helps her feel complete, then we support it. She met Ashlyn's eyes. Thank you for fighting for her. Thank you for giving her life twice, once at birth and once when you refused to let that monster kill her. The 2 mothers stood facing each other, united by their love for the same child, and something passed between them. Understanding, respect, the acknowledgement that Emma was lucky enough to be loved by 2 families, 2 worlds, 2 women who would protect her with everything they had. Over the following months, Emma visited regularly, sometimes for weekends, sometimes for weeks during school breaks. Ashlyn taught her wolf history, pack customs, the basics of supernatural society that most wolves absorbed from birth. The girl was hungry for knowledge, asking questions that revealed keen intelligence and an analytical mind. She wanted to understand everything, from pack hierarchies to territorial disputes to the magic that governed shifting. Thorne taught her defensive tactics, recognizing that even unshifted, she needed to know how to protect herself. He was patient and methodical, treating her with the same respect he showed trained warriors. How to sense danger, how to trust instincts human society taught her to ignore, how to move in a fight, where to strike for maximum impact, when to run, and when to stand. Emma absorbed everything, her natural athleticism and wolf genetics making her a quick study. Magnus worked with her on the spiritual and magical aspects, teaching meditation techniques and breathing exercises designed to coax her dormant wolf closer to the surface. Your wolf has been sleeping because you were raised without pack, without the triggers that normally activate shifting, he explained during one session. But she's there, waiting. With patience and practice, you can learn to wake her. And slowly, carefully, Ashlyn and Emma built something that wasn't quite mother-daughter, but wasn't strangers either, something new and undefined. Emma talked about her human childhood, her friends at school, her dreams of becoming a veterinarian because she'd always felt connected to animals in ways she couldn't explain. Ashlyn shared stories of Kira as an infant, the 3 days they'd had together, the white fur she'd found so beautiful, and Valdis had called cursed. "You're not cursed," Ashlyn said one evening as they sat on the walls watching sunset. "You're unique, special. Everything Valdis feared was actually everything that makes you strong. Different isn't defective. It's potential waiting to be unlocked." On a cold December morning, 3 months after their first meeting, Emma shifted for the first time. It happened during a training session with Thorne and Cole, triggered by adrenaline and instinctive response when Cole, acting as designated aggressor in a defense drill, moved too aggressively and Emma's wolf responded to the perceived threat before her human mind could stop it. One moment she was human and frightened. The next, a beautiful white wolf stood in her place, smaller than an adult but unmistakably powerful, coat pure as fresh snow, eyes still that familiar storm gray, but now holding the intelligence of someone straddling two forms. She was magnificent. Everything Valdis had feared and hated made manifest in graceful power. The defect he'd tried to destroy had become something beautiful, proof that difference wasn't weakness, but strength waiting to be recognized. Ashlyn wept when she saw her daughter's wolf for the first time. Not from grief, though there was grief for the 6 years lost. Not from fear, though there was fear for what Emma would face as a white wolf in a world that still carried prejudice, but from overwhelming joy mixed with vindication. Valdis had been wrong. Kira had never been cursed. She'd been blessed with uniqueness that made her stronger, not weaker. And now, finally, Ashlyn could see what she'd fought so hard to protect all those years ago. Emma shifted back to human, stumbling slightly as the transformation reversed, and looked at her hands with wonder. I felt her. My wolf. She was beautiful and strong and everything I've been missing. "You were always whole," Thorne said gently. "You just didn't have all the pieces yet. Now you do." Years would pass, and the relationship between Ashlyn and Emma would deepen, though it never quite fit traditional definitions. Emma went to human college as planned, became a veterinarian with a specialty in large animal care, and used her unique perspective to help other supernatural children who struggled with their dual nature. She never fully joined Silvercrest Pack, never gave up her human life, but she visited regularly and considered both worlds home. She brought her human parents to pack gatherings, carefully bridging worlds that rarely intersected. The Hartwells learned to accept the supernatural aspects of their daughter's life with the same love and support they'd always shown. And Emma, in turn, helped Ashlyn and Thorne's eventual biological children understand that family came in many forms, that love wasn't limited by blood or biology or traditional definitions. Years would pass. Silvercrest would thrive under Thorne and Ashlyn's joint leadership. They would have children eventually, biological heirs to complement Owen and Bryn. They would see the laws they'd fought for enacted across Valdoria, would watch as other packs began protecting instead of purging their different members. They would build something lasting. But in that moment, standing on the walls as sunset painted the sky in gold and crimson, Thorne's arm around her waist, Kira visiting in the den below, Ashlyn felt complete. The rogue had found her pack. The alpha had found his fated mate. And together, they had built a future worth fighting for. The war was over. The healing had begun. And for the first time in 6 years, Ashlyn felt home, not a place or territory, but a state of being. Home was Thorne's arms. Home was pack bonds warm and secure around her heart. Home was knowing she would never face the world alone again. She had found where she belonged,